Welcome again to Zoom Seekers, our June meeting. It's a coincidence that it's Flag Day, but Nancy will be flying the flag for ocean conservation and stuff like that. But we do have a speaker that I've known for, my God, I don't know how many years, Nancy, 20, 30 years or something.
Probably 20.
Yeah, at least. And Nancy and I first met when she was an aquarist at the aforementioned Long Beach Aquarium of the Pacific. And after that, she went and founded her own nonprofit organization called Get Inspired, which is trying to get kids really motivated about the ocean and teach them about marine conservation. And they got all kinds of projects for adults too, because she's involved in kelp restoration and abalone planting and all kinds of cool stuff that she will talk about tonight. So if you would give a warm Zoom Seekers welcome to Nancy Caruso, and then go ahead and mute your mic, if you would, everybody except Nancy, and off we go.
Yeah, I hear somebody washing their dishes in the background.
Yeah, well, we'll fix that because I can mute everybody individually from here. It's great. It's great power, and I wield it very enthusiastically. Whoops, I muted Nancy too. Hold on.
All right, how about that?
There we go.
Okay.
I got carried away. I got carried away.
Okay, does everybody see that?
There we go. Yes.
All right, very good. Well, thank you guys for having me tonight. And it's lovely actually to be digital so we can talk to people all over, sometimes all over the world, at some of these dive club meetings. So it's great to see some familiar faces. And Tom, I got to talk to you about a project coming up over Catalina. So I will contact you at a later date. But I'm glad to hear that the Conservancy is still going over there. I'm going to share with you all about the projects I'm working on right now, some of which some of you have already worked on with me in the past, and there's some new projects too. So if you have any heart-stopping questions, you can put them in the chat and Ken will stop me and ask me the question. Otherwise, we're going to have a little Q&A section at the end of my talk, and I'll be happy to answer any questions at that time for you. So my name's Nancy Caruso. I'm a marine biologist and founder of Get Inspired, which is a nonprofit organization located in Orange County. And essentially, I started it because I kept getting laid off. So in 2009, I started Get Inspired after getting laid off from a few other nonprofit jobs. I just figured I could lay myself off. Thank you very much if I needed to. But I've been a marine biologist for 28 years. I've been diving for 34 years. And I'm a native Virginian, grew up in Alexandria, Virginia. I went to school at Florida Tech, and Jacques Cousteau is my hero. As most of you will probably say the same thing, which is why we're here tonight. The mission of Get Inspired is to inspire stewardship and curiosity for the natural world through the exploration of science. And that all just means that I love science and I love teaching it to other people, and I love the ocean. So I use that as my tool. And right now I have 3 different programs going on with Get Inspired. I'm going to share a little bit of information about the first 2 with you, and then I'm going to get into the ocean restoration projects, which usually is of interest to most divers. But I've worked in 40 different schools, and I've taught almost 12,000 students myself through the school year with these programs. And some of them might be of interest to you as well. The first program is called Aquaponics, Food for Our Future. And this is actually a farming technique in which crops and fish are grown in the same body of water. This is a picture over at Disney World in Epcot Center. I actually worked there when I graduated from college, but you can see there's lettuce growing and strawberries growing in the same tank with some tilapia and with some barramundi there. And this just allows the essentially a natural cycle of fish fertilizer to grow food. And, all food needs some sort of fertilizer, usually in the form of some animal's poop. And why not use fish? And then you get 2 crops out of it. It's a great program because it is based in water conservation. It uses 90% less water than traditional agriculture. It allows us to grow food where we live. I grow food in my own backyard with aquaponics and hydroponics as well. and it teaches fish biology, plant biology, chemistry, systems, and engineering. So it's a really great teaching tool, and kids really, don't grow a lot of their own food here in Southern California. If you grew up in Illinois, it'd be a different story. But growing food here is kind of nostalgic, I guess, because we just don't have the land space, of course, anymore. So I can do it in pretty small space, about the size of a desk, and the kids can grow a whole new crop of lettuce or herbs or something about every 4 weeks or so. And at the end of the school year, they get to eat their fish. I also have another program called Science Expeditions, and this one is geared towards the environmental science programs, where the kids are required to go out and learn how to do field science. So you see a picture of Catalina there. The kids are up on top of the hill above the Wrigley Institute. But I take them all over because I love geology and ecology. So I teach those programs in different ecosystems all over Southern California, and even into Baja and up into Alaska as well. And there's some students doing some soil science. I usually have a summer camp as well, not this summer or the last 2 summers, unfortunately, but taking, real kids that are really excited about science, really in depth. They want to learn some research techniques, kind of like the scientific diver program, really, and taking them over to Catalina on a 5-day live aboard trip and really immersing them in dive science and underwater research. And the last project I'm going to talk about is the ocean restoration projects that I've been working on for the last 20 years, again, through various organizations, because I kept getting laid off, but now, of course, under Get Inspired. And the premise behind these projects is that people only protect what they love, and they only love what they understand. So I don't have to convince any of you to love kelp, but the average layperson doesn't really have that appreciation for kelp forests. So getting kids to understand kelp makes them love it, which is what the goal is. So I've been working on restoration of giant kelp forests, white sea bass, green abalone, and I just started working on restoring Pismo clams as well. So the goals of all these projects are to educate students about aquaculture and kelp forest ecology, involve the community in the restoration, so that includes adults, and create ocean stewards, and of course, restore species to our coast. So I use aquaculture for education and restoration, and it's often termed a bad word, which I don't really like that idea because I majored in aquaculture and marine biology. So I actually believe in aquaculture, and I think it's the only thing that's going to save our human species, given that 2 billion people on the planet rely on reef fish and fish from the oceans for their sustenance. We simply cannot continue to take as we have in the past. So aquaculture, whether we like it or not here in the United States, is 51% of seafood is produced that way. And it's going to have to continue to provide us with protein. Kelp forest restoration was the first project I was involved in. And I started this project in 2002 when the reefs looked like this in Southern California. Thank God we don't have this anymore. But unfortunately, it's on the North Coast now. So there's 600 miles of coastline that do look like this at the moment. And I'll go into a little bit of the history here. Essentially, it happened because, one, we lost the sea otter. The last otter was killed in 1884 in Southern California. And they, of course, play a dominant role in the kelp forest ecosystem. So without the sea otter, of course, there are less predators for the sea urchin, and sea urchin loves to eat kelp. So the sea urchin population was one less predator. So it had an opportunity to expand. Human impacts had a big consequence on the kelp forest ecosystem as well. In the 50s and 60s, the space race was going on, and the aerospace industry exploded, building lots of roads and churches and homes and tracks and parking lots and in Southern California. So we therefore covered over most of our natural surfaces with concrete. And of course, now runoff is a very big issue. And in Orange County alone, about 3.5 million gallons a day runs off into the ocean. In LA County, it's even higher because you have more people there. But the consequence of all that is turbidity. Turbidity is the cloudiness of the water. And simply put, kelp doesn't grow as deep as it used to in the early 1900s because light transmittance is less now. If you ever got a chance to talk to Dottie Frazier before she passed, she would tell you about, diving for, not even diving, sitting in her boat in Long Beach and plucking abalone off the bottom with a long pole because she could see to the bottom. And that's a very, that doesn't happen very often anymore along our coast here, where you could see the bottom, especially well enough to pluck abalone. I don't know how she ever did that. She must have had great forearm strength. The last straw that broke the camel's back after the sea otter and the turbidity increase and the sea urchin populations exploding was the El Nino of 1983. And that El Nino was the highest, or the strongest rather, on record. If you were around for those storms, they literally broke down some of our piers along the coast. And the result after those storms was this: the weakened kelp forest that was barely hanging on at the time ended up on our beaches, and they literally never recovered after that El Nino storm.
Nancy, where was that picture taken? Do you know?
That was in San Diego. I don't know which beach.
Yeah, pretty dramatic.
Pretty dramatic. And I didn't live here then, but I was told that that was a very, very serious stormy year.
I was here for that El Nino, and it was pretty gnarly. So
Yeah.
It was interesting to go down to Veterans Park in Redondo and watch the 20-foot waves rolling in.
Oh my gosh. So the project to restore the kelp was a NOAA funded project, federally funded, and it required that it was a community-based project. So I started recruiting and training divers, and I was putting, basically we had newspapers at that time. This was 2002. So I was putting ads in the Scuba Diving News and in the Grenion Gazette and going to talk to dive clubs, just starting to meet people in the diving community. And eventually I was able to train about 287 divers to come out with me and help me basically pick up urchins, survey for algae, fishes, and invertebrates, similar to what Reef Check created after we started this. And I then adopted the Reef Check protocols, and then go out and plant kelp. So met a lot of great people, have a lot of great friends, some of whom are still volunteers after 20 years. I taught 5,000 students how to grow kelp in their classrooms in a very highly technical piece of equipment, Rubbermaid containers and a shop light and a chiller to grow the kelp in. And the kids would just get the kelp spores to release from the sporophylls, and we would get the spores to land on little pieces of bathroom tile. And we'd grow them to about 4 millimeters in classroom. And then we'd put them in the ocean. And as soon as we put them in the ocean, they'd take off because the ocean has every element on the periodic table. So it had everything it needed. And that little holdfast would start to grow over top of the tile and attach to the reef. And after 10 years of work and me going through 2 different layoffs, 3 organizations, we restored the kelp. And it had to actually come to an end because of the implementation of the Marine Life Protection Act and the MPAs. So I got a phone call that said, "That's it, Nance, your work is done. And you can't do any more work after this day because the MPA is going to be put in place." So we had a big urchin rodeo on the last day. We got 14,000 urchins out of Shaw's Cove on that last day.
Nancy, maybe explain a little more how the MPA affected your ability to take out the urchins for anyone who doesn't understand.
That's a good question. They said no more restoration can happen, even though it's in there that restoration is allowed in the marine reserves. Turns out, I didn't know this until 3 years ago. They forgot to put the word restoration as a permitted activity for the state marine conservation areas, which is a different type of MPA. It encompasses Crystal Cove State Park and Dana Point and South Laguna. And so I had to go write a bill to get that word put in there. And essentially I was lobbying for it, saying if we ever had a disaster that we couldn't do restoration in those state marine conservation areas without this change in legislation. And sure enough, 2 weeks after the governor signed my bill, after lobbying for a year and a half, we had an oil spill in Orange County. So we can do restoration in those state marine conservation areas now, or at least it's allowed. I'm still going to have to fight to get my permits to plant things in there. But anyway, throughout the process, I had my students out, and I was out at all kinds of festivals and fairs, and we educated about 50,000 people about the loss of the kelp forest, because most people didn't know they were even gone, of course, right? They don't go underwater like we do. So the funny story is in 2009, Labor Day weekend, I got a phone call after that weekend. The city of Laguna Beach mayor called me and said, Nancy, there was a large south swell on the Friday before Labor Day, and we had the worst Labor Day for our businesses in our history. And the city Chamber of Commerce wants you to come and explain why the kelp needed to be planted, because it was all over the beaches and nobody wanted to sit on the beaches. And that's why our Labor Day businesses were so bad. So I had to go explain to the city of Laguna Beach why kelp was important. They hadn't had it in 25 years. So most people didn't even remember that there was kelp at one point. I brought old archival photos showing kelp rack on the beach and it's natural, explaining the value of kelp rack. They were really happy about it. But I realized that of those 50,000 people that I educated, I missed a whole lot of the multi-million-dollar homeowners in Laguna Beach. So we put on a kelp fest in 2010 with all my students, and lots of arts and dance and music and songs and Girl Scouts and kids, so that we could teach the city that kelp was important. So we continued that for 5 years. And I then gave away the Kelp Fest to the Laguna Ocean Foundation, because I had accomplished my goal of fostering an appreciation for the importance of the kelp forest. And they just had their Kelp Fest last weekend. So the kelp was restored. We were so happy. Now we have a new threat. 2006, I noticed this weird algae in Fisherman's Cove in Orange County, and I reported it to the Department of Fish and Wildlife, and they said, whatever you do, don't touch it, because it's going to spread all over the place. Well, I didn't do it, but it is all over the place. The sargassum is everywhere, and really, 2014 was the height of the kelp restoration. By the way, this was going on in 4 different counties. It was happening in Los Angeles County, San Diego County, and Santa Barbara County as well, because that NOAA funded grant funded 4 biologists to do the work in all 4 counties. And so I'm just speaking from my experience and working in Orange County. But the sargassum showed up, and then 2014 was the highest kelp density we'd had in 50 years. We were all so happy. And then came the disaster, right? The warm water blob and the El Nino that lasted 4.5 years of warm water came after that. So I've been watching intently to see the return of normal again, because that would, if the kelp comes back, that would indicate restoration was complete, because kelp is supposed to restore itself, right? After an El Nino, it's like the forest fire. It's the reset button. It levels the playing field. All the other algae get to try to compete with each other, and the climax community is reached, which is the kelp forest. And then an El Nino comes and wipes it all out again, and it starts all over. Well, during that time that we didn't have kelp, during the 4.5 years of warm water, because the kelp needs nutrients that are lacking during warm water periods, this sargassum took over completely, right? We saw that in Catalina, we saw it on our local shores. And I was very concerned, because the Department of Fish and Wildlife did not do anything to control it when it showed up. And it is now on all 5 Channel Islands, and from mid-Baja all the way to Monterey. So I wanted to do some projects with it. They wouldn't let me, because you can't pull an invasive species out of an MPA. I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me either. So call your local Fish and Wildlife, Craig Schumann, and let him know. But this is what sargassum looks like in its different life stages. So over on the left there in letter A, that's the stage it's in right now over here on our coast. It's in, I call it the fern stage. It's very young. Then it goes through a kind of a teenage phase where it's got the little air bladders on it. Then it grows those chili pepper bladders that are long and skinny. And if you look really closely, they kind of look furry. That's when it's reproducing. Basically, those little dots in D there are all falling off. They're all reproductive eggs, and they'll grow new plants. And I found that they come in like the infantry. So if an area is cleared, new ones will come right back in. So it's really does well here in Southern California. And then right in letter E there is the wiry senescent stage, which you are also seeing right now on some of the reefs because the old stuff's dying and the new stuff is starting. So it's actually an annual life cycle. So around June, July, you see this letter A, and then starting in about April, you see letter E there as the old stuff is dying off. So once the kelp was restored, I started working on other species. I love aquaculture. That was my major in college with marine biology. So I partnered up with Hub SeaWorld Research Institute on their white sea bass restocking program. They did not have any programs in schools. So I started building classroom versions of their systems down in San Diego. And I have 5 schools up here in Orange County that are growing white sea bass, and we release them twice a year. There's some of the baby sea bass. This is in conjunction with the net pens that you have in Marina Del Rey and Huntington Harbor and Newport Harbor and Dana Point, where the fishermen, the anglers take care of the fish in those pens, and then they release them as well every year. So the kids are releasing them from their classroom, but they're taking care of the systems, feeding the fish, and then they're able to restock them in the ocean themselves. And if you haven't heard an update on this program, they were recently published. Finally, they've gotten some DNA analysis done and found out that 46% of the Southern California, or actually the California stock of white sea bass has come from this program that they've been doing for 26 years, releasing white sea bass from Hub SeaWorld Research Institute. So it's very, very exciting that they've finally been able to get this data, the DNA analysis done. So about 4,000 kids have released about 2,000 fish in the last 10 years. It's a great program, and students get real hands-on experience. I've actually gotten kids jobs in aquaculture after doing this. So that's a wonderful, wonderful thing. There's some kids releasing fish. We've actually released them underwater too, because a lot of students that go through my programs become divers. So they're releasing them underwater. There's Newport Harbor, Orange Coast College is releasing their fish. Okay, so next species is the green abalone. That was kind of a common sense move, right? Once the kelp forests are back, you start working on the abalone because we've eaten most of those. Most people should know what an abalone is if you're a diver, but it looks like a rock pretty much. And we have the most noticeable, I guess, appearance of abalone now is in jewelry, buttons and rings and barrettes, but they're now illegal to take commercially anywhere in the United States. And there's 57 species found around the world, and wherever they're found, they're threatened and endangered because, well, let's face it, they're a snail and they taste good. So they're kind of doomed from the very beginning. But they are farm raised, and we have 3 farms here in California that raise them for food. The closest one is in Goleta, California. But everywhere that they have traditionally eaten abalone, they actually aquaculture them now to meet the demand because, again, they're threatened and endangered in the wild. But here in the United States, we have 7 species, and all of them occur here in Southern California. So we're really lucky to be able to find 7 different species of abalone. All of the fisheries are closed, and all of the abalone are in some level of federal concern, either endangered or threatened. This is what they all look like. It takes a while to learn how to identify them. I still have never seen a flat abalone in the wild or a white abalone in the wild. I know that I would notice that, hey, I've never seen that kind of abalone before, but I've never seen one to be able to identify it. I do have their shells, but I don't have any resources in the wild. So if you did not live during a time when there were abalone, it's difficult, especially to explain to young kids that there used to be a lot, right? That doesn't really mean anything. So I have a lot of graphic pictures that explain, this is how many we used to have. This is how many we used to have. This is a processing plant in Santa Barbara. This is a tide pool in Laguna Beach, and all those little white dots are black abalone, which are now an endangered species. And I have literally looked for them for 15 years, and I've only found 2 in my whole life. So things are a little bit different now. We used to have a lot of them. This is a restaurant with 50,000 abalone shells on the outside of the restaurant, just because they were around, right? And they're not little, those are big shells. That's how many we used to have. The height of the industry was the 50s and 60s, 44 million pounds harvested. The fishery's been closed since 1997 here in Southern California. And it's illegal to take them at all. So I started up a little celebration a few years ago, realizing that this part of our culture is gone. And a friend of mine started the Surfing Heritage Museum, and he was telling me about ab feeds. This was an event kind of like a clam bake or a crab boil or a lobster boil where I come from. And these are pictures from an actual ab feed where members of the community would get together, collect abs, pound abs, and then, serve them communally. This picture right in the middle is right down in front of Dana Point, right at the Ocean Institute there up against the cliff. That fireplace is still there. So I had an ab feed in 2019, invited young people, invited older people to tell the stories of ab diving and what it was like to live in a time when there were abalone. Some of the historians brought their old big shells and their tools, and you can see the pounding log there that they would pound out the abs. And I bought them from the farm up in Goleta, and we had an ab feast. It was fantastic. So I've done that twice, and then COVID happened. So I'm hoping to start that up again if anybody wants to come feast on abalone. And of course, aquaculture feeds this desire for us to still eat abalone today. This is a picture. You said you're in Waikiki. There is an abalone restaurant at the Moana Mall. You can go in and get this abalone. This is Kona abalone that's grown on the Big Island, and they serve it over there in the Moana Mall. You can get it sliced on vermicelli. You can get it sliced on the salad, or you can just have an abalone steak. I highly recommend it. So the goal of this project is to create the largest collaborative effort to save a species in Southern California waters. I've been working on it since 2009 when I called the Department of Fish and Wildlife and said, I want to restore abalone. And they said, it's going to be hard. And they were right, because it took me 3 years of pounding on them to get a permit for my first outplanting. But I have partners all over Southern California to help me grow them. As I said, I grow them in schools, but I also have Orange Coast College, Ocean Institute, Pennington Marine Lab, California Science Center, Concordia University. And I hope to start outplanting them now that I've got this bill passed. I'm going to ask for permission next year. And they said it'll probably take me 2 years of pounding on them, the department that is, to get my permits. I've taught 3,000 kids how to grow abalone, and I hope to put them back, these nurseries, back in the schools next year, since things are starting to turn back to some sort of normalcy. So I've got 10,000 abalone growing up on the abalone farm in Goleta. They are taking care of them for me. I spawned 4 different cohorts, and the smallest ones are about 2 centimeters. The biggest ones are about 3.5 inches right now. And then the last species I've taken up, because it takes a long time to grow an abalone, and I don't want to plant them in the ocean until they're at least 5 inches, because the bigger they are, the less predators they have. Nobody has gotten better survival on abalone outplanting than me in the world, because I've outplanted 14 centimeter abalone, which is about 6 inches, a 6-inch abalone. I got 40% survival. The next best survival was about 6%. So I know that if I can keep fundraising and keep paying the farmer to take care of them to the tune of $25,000 a year, I will have better success because they won't get eaten within the first 24 hours of putting them in the ocean. So Pismo clams were the next species because I kept hearing stories about pismos when I would talk to people about abalone. And I realized I'd never seen a pismo clam. So I set out to start digging in Orange County to find out where they are and how many there are. And there's no data on them for the last 40 years. The fishery's still open. But I just finished raking 4.2 miles of Bolsa Chica State Beach over the last 5 months with 113 volunteers. And we found 4 legal sized Pismo clams. So there aren't that many left, which is why I've never seen anybody digging for Pismos. So lots of questions to answer. Nobody knows how they reproduce, how to get them to reproduce, what they eat, how do you settle the larvae, what do you feed the larvae? So there's a lot of work to do there, but what else am I going to do? This is what a Pismo clam looks like. They're absolutely gorgeous. I'm now in love with another species. Doesn't have a face though, like an abalone. So I don't know if I like it as much as an abalone, but they are pretty dang cute, especially when they're trying to bury themselves in the sand. So you might be thinking, Nancy, how can I help you? And I'm so glad you asked. I have lots and lots of ways to help. I have opportunities for free divers. We snorkeled in tide pools for 3.5 years. And let me tell you, I had no idea how awesome tide pools were. But free divers, of course. Here's what I'm looking for diving and volunteers. In order to be a volunteer diver, you've got to be at least rescue certified, have at least 50 cold water dives, have diver insurance, have all your own gear, be available on weekdays. And then if you've got some sort of scientific diver training, that's a plus because that's what I'm doing. I do dive on weekdays because I'm a member of a boat club. You go out on a boat, but it's so much easier to get the boat reserved on weekdays. So that's why I go out then. I also have non-diving volunteers. There can see one of my volunteers in the tide pool in 6 inches of water snorkeling, which is actually quite fun. And then Pismo Clam surveys. I'll be starting those up again in the fall in Newport Beach, looking for Pismos. And on your next dive, feed an abalone. That's how you can help. They love to eat kelp. You just put it right in front of their faces and they'll grab it from you, actually. The most action you'll see out of an abalone in your life. Report poachers. That's how you can help. Every time I see an empty shell on the bottom of the ocean, I pick it up and look for knife marks. You see those knife marks there on the slide? Those tell me that abalone was poached because abalone don't have any sharp parts. And I report that to the Department of Fish and Wildlife. And it turns out there's a whole lot of poaching going on. So the more people we get in trouble, or the more people we tell are poaching, the more, hopefully, the more wardens and more money will be put towards, protecting our marine protected areas and our protected species. And on your next dive, look for anything unusual. If you don't know who to tell, you can tell Ken Curtis because I know he's got connections to the department. But tell me if you see something weird like water cypera or these interesting bryozoans I found on one of my dives. This is water cypera. It's a bryozoan as well. And it's not supposed to be here. And it's taken over Monterey Bay. And I've seen it a few places here in Orange County as well. But that's starting to scare me a little bit. Let me know if you see any upside down abalone. They're not supposed to be upside down ever in their lives. There's a disease going through the population. So I'm collecting information about this. And if you got a fishing license, you can do some gardening. You can take 10 pounds of sargassum a day. That's a lot of sargassum in a week or in a month or in a year. And if I'm really interested, if you find any baby abalone less than 3 inches in length, I've been looking for them for 5 years now. And it's extraordinarily rare to find. I'm interested in finding out if you know where there's some nice Pismo clam beds. Or the other thing I'm fascinated with is abalone aggregations of more than 6 abalone. Now, Catalina, I know where I can find some of those, but here on the mainland, I don't know, especially Orange County where I'm studying, difficult to find. And that's why I'm not finding baby abalone. There we go. There's 6 of them. You can also help by buying my merch. I got lots of I got these two fabrics, the kelp and the Garibaldi and the abalone and the kelp batik designs that I actually designed myself. And I have them made in with the block print in Indonesia. I have dresses and men's shirts, and then the How Do You Like My Ab shirts as well. Waterlust sells Abalone Prints, and they support our projects with every purchase that's made. So you can buy your stuff from Waterlust with these beautiful, they actually have men's clothing now too. Although Ken would look really cute in that long sleeve bathing suit.
Well, of course.
And you can set me up on Amazon Smile. Every purchase you make on Amazon, they make a donation to me. So just go to smile.amazon.com and choose Get Inspired. And everything you buy through Amazon Smile will come, give me 0.05%. Or just talk about it. Talk about any of these programs, because that's how I usually find people to help me or donate to the projects. And that's super helpful. So thank you all very much. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to take them.
Let me have you stop your screen share.
Yeah.
And there we go. Everybody back. Okay, now everybody give her, please, a warm Reef Seekers round of applause. So if you have a question, you can either physically raise your hand or use the little raise hand icon. But I get to, this is one of the good things about being the host. I get to ask the first question. So with the abalone, I mean, you covered a lot of ground here tonight, Nancy.
Yeah.
But with the abalone, is Withering Foot playing any kind of a role there? And maybe explain what Withering Foot disease was as well.
Withering Foot is a disease that has been studied quite a lot in the last few years, but they figured out it is it's caused by a bacteria-like organism that is actually in the population. Every abalone has it. So that's what we found out, Ken. So every abalone in the wild has it, and it succumbs to this organism, causing it to wither away when there's stress in the environment. So just like the sea star wasting disease, the same thing that causes that is always in the environment, but under stress, they melt it away. So the Withering Foot is still around, and I see it happen in my tanks. If we have the chiller go out or something, there's a stressful 48 hours, the abalone will wither. They can't digest food. That's what happens. They can't digest food, and they starve to death essentially over the course of a couple of months. But it is known now, it's in the population, and these upside down abalone are not suffering from Withering Foot. It's something else that we have not figured out yet. And I've had the state pathologist look at it, and they can't determine what it is. But
that was my first thought when I saw the upside down.
Yeah.
Ad.
No, it's not. It's weird. It's making them weak, so they can't hold on. So they fall off like during big swells. And I've found them too, but few people have found them and told me they've seen them in the surf or just laying upside down on the reefs. No bueno.
Not good at all. So if you have a question, let me know. By the way, I mentioned, Nancy mentioned feeding the abalone. And if you've never done that, it really is cool. Find a piece of kelp and just slide it under the ab. In fact, the old secret was you didn't need an ab iron to take an abalone off. You'd slide kelp under it, and as it reared up to eat it, you could just literally pop it off with kelp. But it is fun to watch abalone eat, because this animal you think of as being just clamped to the rock suddenly comes alive. Tom?
Yeah, Nancy, great presentation. Question, aquaponics, is that being done at a commercial scale anywhere in the U.S.?
Yes. Actually all over, and venture capitalists are super into it. So I think the biggest farm is in Wisconsin, but there is one actually here in Whittier. The guy owns his own restaurant, and he has an aquaponics farm called Ocean and Earth. That's the name of his restaurant. I can't tell you what the name of his farm is, but his farm is a couple miles away. Huh. But yeah, it is producing food commercially, and it's mostly in the colder states and in Canada as well.
But that guy's probably doing it for his restaurant. I'm not sure I'd consider that commercial. I'm thinking larger scale.
Yeah, no, it is. Like I said, the largest ones are in Wisconsin. There's some in Michigan.
What kind of fish do you know?
Minnesota. Tilapia is the most common because it's easy fish to grow, but it's relatively disease free. So, but you can use any fish as long as they're like the same temperature that the plants like.
And do you have any idea what the cycle is on the whatever the greens that they're growing is?
It depends on the green. So you can rotate lettuce every 3 weeks.
Huh.
You can seed them and rotate it out full heads. I actually was helping to build a commercial aquaponics farm up near Sacramento. But there are farms here in California as well that supply local markets, but nothing that's, taking over Stater Brothers or anything.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Kaz Azawa posted a question in the chat, and he says, if divers are pulling sargassum, legally, of course, I'm sure, is there a right way or a wrong way to do that?
Well, get the whole thing. And if you pull a few thousand of them, you will notice that there's a little pop when you pull it, you got the whole hold fast. So that's the right way, is to get the whole thing. The wrong way just is going to lead it to grow back. So the point of pulling it, which I was trying to create a project around, was to free up space on the reef for giant kelp. So it takes up real estate. And as you know, it's dense. There's no light getting in, so nothing can grow underneath it. Nothing can even swim through it. So the point was to clear a space where kelp could then get a hold of the reef, and then the kelp can outcompete it, no problem. It just needs a spot to land so that it can start growing. So it also can, at certain different parts of its life stage, and I'm not sure if this is clear when yet, but it can produce allelopathic compounds, and Dr. Bill would lecture me on this, but it produces compounds which deters other algae from growing around it. And a lot of other land plants do this too. So the earlier, the better. It's not reproductive, it's small, and you can get thousands of them in a square meter when they're really young. So right now is a good time to go out there and pull it.
Because I guess the concern I would have, with your C or D slide is, are you pulling it and suddenly dispersing all the spores, at the same time, and really, creating the problem you're trying to solve?
Well, they're releasing anyway, if you weren't pulling them, number one, but they're already everywhere.
Okay.
So Monterey had reports of 2 different sites where they found sargassum. They pulled it, got rid of it, but somebody's been checking the eDNA on the cobbles and the rocks on the beaches, and it's everywhere. It's just waiting for the perfect warm water, and it's going to spring up. Yeah. So it's kind of ubiquitous. There is no managing it, but getting kelp in there is the way to manage it, because the kelp can outcompete it, no problem. It's these disruption events that we get with El Nino and warm water blob that, of course, the kelp dies back, and that's when it took over the reefs. So my concern was, oh my gosh, how are we going to get the kelp back in balance again so it can take its rightful place on our reefs? But doing that this year.
I was going to say, it's hard to get that balance.
It's hard to get that balance, yeah.
Around. And I'm always reminded, sometimes we have the best intentions. The story I've always heard is years and years ago in New England, there were sea starfish, decimating oyster beds or something like that. And so the fishermen who were getting affected by this hired divers to pull out all the sea stars, and they did. And then the fishermen had a big party on the beach, and they took the sea stars and they cut all their arms off, and they'd show them, and they threw all the dead sea stars back into the ocean,
Yeah.
Not knowing everything was going to regenerate. So, sometimes we think we're solving a problem, and we actually create a worse problem than we had to begin with. So,
are you seeing, because I haven't been to Catalina yet this year, are you seeing that the kelp has taken its rightful place back on the reef again? Is it out competing the sargassum?
Well, the last time I don't think I've dove it, certainly not since about January this year. So at that time, but again, that's like not sargassum season. So the kelp was back. But I know when I was there over the weekend, Mark Guccione was mentioning that the kelp was really coming back strong. I didn't, from the surface, but I didn't take that good a look either. I didn't really see any evidence of sargassum or hear anybody talking about it, but you got to figure it's there. It's there somewhere, and hopefully there's enough kelp, and the kelp has reclaimed enough territory that it'll be hard for the sargassum to get a foothold again.
Yeah.
So we were doing a kelp survey today in the refuge, and I'd say the kelp is doing macrocystis is doing well at the shallower depths. There's a lot more sargassum.
So you did have sargassum up there, Tom.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just so you guys don't know, if you don't know what he's referring to, he's up by the isthmus. This is the Wrigley Marine Preserve that's up by the chamber.
What's shallow, Tom?
20 and
Okay.
up.
Okay.
That was
Does sargassum have a depth limit, Nancy or Tom?
I've seen it at Bird Rock at like 60 feet. And nobody's ever said it could grow in 60 feet, but it does.
Yeah. Okay. Anyone else have any questions or anything on your mind? You know, we put everybody back. I'm switching back and forth between the speaker view and the gallery view. It's mainly for, I think, the Zoom recording, but yeah, I'm going to put someone on the spot because Eric Ernest is here. He is a professional chef. And I'm going to say, Eric, do you do have any experience with aquaponics stuff in any of the, and I'm assuming he's listening, but he's muted. Do you have any experience with any aquaponics and any of the stuff you're doing? There he goes.
Ken, why do you keep waking me up from my nap?
I know, I tell you. I'm so sorry.
Great presentation. I'll make sure to add you to my Amazon Smile tomorrow.
Oh,
yeah, I've used a number of the different Aquafarm products, and I've been a part of a few projects. One was at USC. I'm private chef now, so all of my clients want wild seafood, but yeah, I mean, the tilapia is probably the most common just because it grows the best.
Yeah.
But there's a number of species, and it compares with the quality farmed fish.
Have you heard about the new shrimp farm in Downey?
I haven't, no, but there's farms that pop up all over the world. I mean,
Well, there's no other shrimp farm in Los Angeles, I can tell you that.
Yeah, I bet.
But they just start, there's a lot of venture capitalists trying to put money into growing shrimp in large cities, because as you know, most of the shrimp we eat in the US is imported from Southeast Asia, where there are no controls over environmental degradation and antibiotics and all that stuff. So all the big cities, Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York, Chicago, they're all trying to get shrimp farms, and they're selling really high end to really high end restaurants and hotels.
Yeah, that's cool. I'll check it out.
Yeah, it's called Transparent Sea.
Everybody needs a catchy name, right?
Yeah.
Very good. We
Awesome,
got any
thanks.
other questions?
So
Anyone?
Laura asked a question.
Laura,
if
go.
you send me an email, I will put you on my list. And when I have things going on, I just send out an email that says, hey, who wants to come? Who wants to
And
come
if
help?
you guys don't have the chat, Laura's question was how do we find out about events?
Here's
where
my
you need
email
divers-
address.
Need divers or other helpers. She helped on one event a few weeks ago, but have lost contact. Robin's got a question.
There's my
Yes,
email address.
please. Pardon my ignorance, but I moved to Northern California 20 some odd years ago. Did I hear you say that personally an individual cannot take abalone off the coast of California anymore?
Correct. December 2017, the fishery was closed because all the kelp died.
But isn't there a
There's-
free dive? Isn't there a free diving exception above?
No. Not anymore.
Used to be, but there used to be, right?
2017, the fishery was
Okay.
closed.
So it's completely illegal to take any abalone off the coast of California?
Correct.
Catalina Island?
Correct.
Oh, God,
No,
yeah.
Nowhere.
For years and years.
Catalina's been since 1997.
Yeah. And I mean, one of the things, and I think you can correct me, you'd probably be more knowledgeable about it than I was, Nancy. This is one of the battles that people like Nancy and me and Tom fight all the time, that years ago, it was discovered that there's a healthy clutch of red abalone at San Miguel Island. And the people who would like to be able to fish those abalone submitted a plan. They said, oh, we can make it sustainable. And we're going, no, you're just going to go in and clear out all the abalone. And then when you're done, we're right back where we started. So it is an ongoing battle to, to make sure that these animals have a healthy area. I certainly was not here. I came to California in 81. So I never saw, those vast abalone fields, but you definitely saw a lot of them, in the 80s. And Withering Foot, did not help. But and for those of you not totally familiar with the Withering Foot disease, one of the problems got to be when I'm not a hunter, never been a hunter, and my deal with abalone is, even though Nancy said it tastes good, I'm thinking like, take an old shoe, beat the hell out of it, douse it in butter, tastes just about as good. But on the boats where we get abalone, if I'm recalling right, I want to say the limit was, I want to say 2 a day. But you would put the abalone in live wells. And what we later on discovered, that with the boats going around island to island, that's how we were spreading Withering Foot disease, that you'd have diseased abalone in the live wells, and the water then would just be transmitted and the bacteria to the next island that you went to. So again, sometimes you just don't know, you're not aware of what you're doing, even though you think you're being reasonable and everything else. So and by the way, if you look in the chat, Nancy's email is nancy@getinspiredinc.org. So, and if you forget that, you can certainly get a hold of me, and I can shoot you her email as well. Any other final questions, final thoughts, final comments, final Jeopardy? I
had a question.
Yes, Greg.
Nancy, it's great to see you again. I saw you probably 15 years ago when I still lived in Southern California.
Yeah, nice to see you.
And the kelp restoration was kind of in full bloom. So did you say now in Northern California it's urchin barrens like it used to be off Orange County?
Yep. Yeah,
Oh, that's a
600
shame.
miles of coast from Monterey all the way up to the Oregon border.
So
They
do they have projects like the kelp restoration project that you had?
And you should ask that. So when it happened, 2016, it collapsed, and everybody was watching the abalone because they were starving. They lost 30% of the red abalone population in the first year, which is why the fisheries closed, and nobody was doing anything. And everybody who was working when I was doing the kelp project is dead or retired. So nobody remembers that we did kelp restoration. So I made an announcement at a meeting and said, I've seen this happen. You guys got to get on top of this, because they had 1 million little dime-sized urchins all over the reefs. And I said, you need to sweep these up while they're loose, because they're really easy to pick up. And they said, did you say you had reports that talked about this? And I said, oh my God, you have a filing cabinet full of my reports. So they asked me for my reports that I gave them every quarter for 10 years. Anyway, nobody was doing anything. And my husband showed me the movie Chasing Coral. This was in 2017. And I watched the end of the movie where the famous coral researcher looks at the camera. He says, I should have done more. And I went, crap. So I started the restoration project in Northern California because nobody was doing anything. So I got $5,000 from Oceana and started paying commercial urchin divers to go out and vacuum up sea urchins at Casper Cove. And now that took on a whole life. Now there's millions and millions of dollars going into research up there, but no one is planting kelp because the Department of Fish and Wildlife won't let them. They're allowed to smash urchins. They're allowed to vacuum up urchins, but they've forgotten that we've already done it. And they won't let anybody do it because they're scared.
There's a great thing in all this. It's called, and looking around, some of you are old enough to be the bearers of this. It's called institutional memory. And those of us who have been around a while sometimes have to remind those who have just come onto the scene, hey, here's the deal. Here's what used to be. Here's what we did. We can do this again, blah, 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 woof, woof, woof. So you never know.
I started diving in 1970, going to Catalina on the Bandito, coming back and on the back of the boat with the hibachi, doing abalone and lobster. San Miguel, when you got out there, you would just see a whole wall full of abalone.
Wow. Got any pictures?
No.
Ah,
My buddy had the pictures, but
if anybody's got
I-
any old photos, I'm always
Yeah.
collecting old photos.
I had to pull him off the wall. He was going after Ab, and he looked at me funny. I pointed him in a different direction, and there were abs twice the size that he was going to take.
Wow.
So
And again, the thing to remind you guys all about, and again, not having been an ab hunter, I won't maybe get the numbers totally right, but the minimum size for a red was, I think, 7 inches. And a green, I
8.
think it was at 7 or 8, but a green, I think, was 6. And I want to say a black was 5. But they had to grow. And Nancy, you were mentioning how you want to let the abalone get big enough. How long does it take for an ab to get to legal size, roughly? How long does it take for a green, let's say, to get to 6 inches, since you're doing a lot of greens?
Minimum 7 years.
Yeah.
yeah, your ab iron was also a measuring tool.
Yeah.
So you could check to see how large the ab was if it was legal to take.
Correct. And
I trained with,
Go ahead, Robin.
I trained with Dick Stride, if any of you remember him.
Sure.
Stridette, CSUN. My favorite course at Valley State.
He went out every weekend and got abs and more abs and more abs. And then at the end of the session, 16 weeks of scuba diving, he would do an abalone feast for the entire class and feed everybody. And like you said, Ken, pound it out. It's like shoe leather. It's fried. Anything fried is good. Like, why bother? And never got into abalone.
He took us off Malibu. We
Yeah.
used to have a lot of kelp beds to get abs.
Yep. I was the only girl that passed the test to get into his class that year.
I got in as a sophomore. I had to fight my way in because it was only for juniors and seniors.
Oh, really?
Yeah. 1970.
And for those of you of the younger persuasion, the thing to remember here is, we had these walls of abalone. Come on, there's no way we can wipe all these out. It's just one Coke can I'm going to throw in the ocean. There's no way I can trash up the ocean. We forget, how destructive we can be, and what seems to be just a little bit of big deal. When you multiply it times the number of people doing it, sometimes it becomes a huge, huge problem. So at any rate, any other final questions or comments or shared experiences?
Well, I graduated from Dick Stride to Dave Bunch to Tom Quick.
There you go. There you go. Three of the notables here in Southern California. I've lost touch with Tom, but Dave Bunch was at Chamber Evening with us. I want to say he's in his 90s. I'm trying to remember if he's like 92 or something like that. So
Emerald Bay was his favorite spot.
yeah.
And with Tom, he was my instructor as of when I got my rescue diver certification out of Sunlit.
Yep. All
Ken?
good stuff. Yes.
I had to step away from my computer before we began the actual program. Were you talking about Dr. Bill's memorial earlier? I missed it.
A little bit. I just said I was out there Sunday and of course fried
Yeah,
myself.
got that.
Yeah,
But
that too.
How
Yeah,
was
we
the
had-
memorial?
We had, well, it was a nice collection of people. We had about 100 people out there, I'd say. Because I counted the chairs. There were 70 chairs. There were some empty chairs, but then there were a lot of people standing around. We started around 11 o'clock. And what I thought was very interesting, actually, was a lot of people who were diving the park. There were probably 30, 40 people diving the park that day. Everybody stopped what they were doing. We were set up by the flagpole. Everybody stopped what they were doing. I want to say in the hour and 20 minutes that the entire service took, that probably we had, there maybe were 1 or 2 people who actually went in and did a dive. Everybody just stopped and listened, which I thought was a nice tribute to Bill. Let me try something real quick. I hadn't planned on this, but give me a second to find something I can slap together. I may be able to slap together some of the pictures I
you
took.
might also talk about the effort to get the park renamed.
Oh, yeah, good point. So we have a petition into the aforementioned Fish and Game. Hang on, here we go. That's what I want. So we have a petition into a Fish and Game, or Fish and Wildlife, to rename here's the politics. The land portion, so the actual where you stand and the breakwater down to the water's edge, that is controlled by the city of Avalon and the island company. The original proposal was, can we rename that after Dr. Bill? Too much politics. However, the water portion from the edge of the water out to the boundaries of the marine protected area, controlled by the state of California and the California Fish and, I've never understood why it's the Fish and Game Commission, but it's the Fish and Wildlife Department at any rate. So we put together a petition, and there was a change.org petition that had a bunch of people had, spoken favorably of. We took those names. I had Jean-Michel Cousteau wrote a letter as well, and we put a petition in to California Fish and Game Commission to rename the Marine Protected Area, which is a state marine conservation area, aka SMCA. The official name right now is the Casino Point SMCA, to rename it the Dr. Bill Bushing SMCA at Casino Point. And that is going to be voted on by the Fish and Game Commission on Thursday. If you look at Dr. Bill's Facebook page, I put a link up there as to how you can virtually join the meeting. It's also on Scuba Board. I put the note up there. It's also on my Reef Seekers website for those of you who do not get my my weekly This Week at Reef Seekers. So that hopefully, if we get 3 votes, we're in good shape. There's 5 commissioners, there's 1 vacancy, so we'll see what's what. To give you a real quick idea, I think I'll be able to do this way. Here is what was happening. I'm trying to figure out the pictures. See, the pictures change on, there we go. This was the gathered people. You can see a bunch of the divers standing around in the back. One of Bill's sisters here. I thought it was real nice. The paramedics and some Avalon fire people came by for the whole thing. Another one of Bill's sister, I think that's Nancy, one of his students, Turk. So just a bunch of people spoke every now and then. We had multiple Pelican flybys. We couldn't arrange for planes, so this was the best we could do. But they were coming. They were coming all the time. This is Bill's son, Kevin, who coordinated the whole thing. And this is Mark. Can't remember his last name, but he took over for Bill when Bill left his Toyon Bay position. Susie Deegan was over them a lot. This is his friend Chuck. Matt was there, and what I thought was a very nice touch at the end, they had a lone bagpiper playing Amazing Grace, which was, I thought, very, very moving. That's the new California or Catalina Diver Supply Store. So yeah, it was I think a fitting memorial for him, and it was nice to be there despite the sunburn on my face and my head. The sunburn is bad enough that it hurts to comb my hair, and when I use hairspray, it stings. But what are you going to do? The sacrifices I made for Dr. Bill. So anyhow, thank you again, Nancy, for joining us tonight. And again, it's getinspiredinc.org. And even though she sort of obliquely mentioned it, I'll tell you, she's very happy to take donations, and every little bit helps. And if for nothing else, we don't want her to have to lay herself off from her own jobs. So we're trying to look out for you there, Nancy. Next month, July 12th, we sort of continue with the ocean conservation theme. It is Kurt Lieber with Ocean Defenders Alliance. They're real big about pulling up what we call ghost nets and other stuff that should not be in the ocean. And Kurt will be here talking about what they do, why they do, how they do it, and everything else. So with that, I am going to bid you all a fond farewell. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you again, Nancy, for a really great talk. Hopefully everybody learns something, and kick a few bucks your way. It won't kill you. So anyhow, thanks a lot for joining us on Zoom Seekers. Since I won't talk to you before the 4th of July, have a lovely 4th. Dive safely, obviously, and see everybody hopefully next month as we wave goodbye, and then I do the thing that is the great power move, which is end meeting for all.